There we go. There we go. Hello, everyone. Episode 19 of the HoopTalk podcast. We do have some familiar faces who have joined us before. We obviously do have John D, my co-host. You may have seen me just debate him an hour ago, but now we are friends. We are no longer enemies. John D, how's it been in the last hour since I seen you?
Pretty good, man. I was celebrating the Lakers win because anytime you beat the Oklahoma City Thunder by 30, it feels like you got to celebrate that. You got to do it. And me being the average Laker fan, we're going to the finals. So
I celebrated my win against the Oklahoma City Thunder on Friday.
I 100%.
I'm right there with you. We're also joined by Tyler and Sean, members of the Hoop Venue podcast. You guys have been on before. I can't remember how long ago it was now, but welcome back. How have you guys been?
Yes, sir. We've been good. I can't speak for Sean, but I feel like we've both been pretty good. I said this in our last episode that we recorded a couple days ago. April is just like peak months because it's when like weather starts to get better, playoffs are approaching, and it's just like it's good vibes. Like it's good vibes all around for these next 3 months. So as a basketball creator, I'm in great spirits right now.
Fun but busy. And like Tyler said, just adding on to that, it's one of the best times of the year, right leading into the play-in and the playoffs. So yeah, super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. We are not at the playoffs right now, although the Western Conference is playing like it is the playoffs. It's been dogfight down there.
Beautiful.
But right before the playoffs, I thought we could get into one more all-time discussion. As you can see by the title, we are going to be doing the greatest offensive peaks in NBA history. Now, there is a caveat. We aren't including anything before the shot clock. So as close to history as possible, but anything before 1955, we're just not going to count that. As we always do, I'm going to ask you guys what your criteria were. And then we'll get into our toughest cuts. I'm going to start with John D. John D, what was your criteria?
My criteria was the impact you make on the offense. How easy do you create offense for yourself and others? Obviously, efficiency, and how well do you hold up in the playoffs?
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. It was the same as what we did last time we talked about the defense. For me, it's all about how much you impact, and it's in a vacuum. So it's not necessarily how much you impacted your individual situation, but more so relative to the time you were in. If I put you in a playoff series with any random collection of teammates, how valuable is your skill set in the playoffs? And again, I went by peaks, so longevity wasn't a factor for me.
Basically, just those two things combined, but I also like playoff performance does kind of matter as well. And I figured you guys accounted that, but just throwing it out there is like another category, if you will.
We seem to all be on the same page. So playoff translation, impact on the offensive side of the ball, and then the good old efficiency stuff and all of those good old stuff. Yeah. I will say before I get into everyone's honorable mentions, I'm huge on skill set is like my most important thing. Like I do think there are just skills that are inherently more valuable. So I do have a bias, I guess you could say, towards certain skill sets and how I value them on offense. But outside of that, I think we've pretty much covered our bases. So without further ado, I want to ask everyone who their toughest cuts were. I'm going to start with Sean. Sean, who was your toughest cuts?
We just had to go to me first. The toughest, I really have one like super, super tough cut, and then a lot of guys that I just left off the list. The toughest cut, I guess, was actually probably like Tim Duncan, like early 2000s to Tim Duncan. One of the tougher cuts for me. And then just a bunch of other guys in general that, has some consideration, but Tim was probably one of the tougher ones.
Interesting.
I didn't consider Tim Duncan. I'll just put that out there.
I see the case with Tim, like the no help in 2003. Well, I don't want to say no help, but very limited offensive help. And then just this mega isolation post scorer who's also a really good passer. I feel like people look at the beautiful game Spurs and underrate what the early 2000s Spurs offenses looked like. And it was all Tim Duncan.
People say the Spurs system, and it's like that system really didn't come around until like the 2010s. Like this system really was just give the ball to Tim Duncan and
exactly
or create an advantage. The system didn't exist. So I agree with that. I think I'll say very commonly, I'm not very high on the ISO-centric players, generally speaking. There may be one exception, but I'm not particularly high on those players. So that's probably why Tim Duncan didn't make it for me. Tyler, do you have any toughest cuts?
Yeah, I'm gonna sound like a hater here. I think when you get to these level of player, like I think there's very minimal difference between like 15 on my list and number 6. Like, I think it's so tightly knit that you kind of have to get really nitpicky. And this comes back to what I said about how I value impact in a vacuum and impact in a bunch of different situations, the ability to translate your game into any set of teammates, any scheme. And for me, the 2 toughest cuts were actually both Luka and Harden. And it's very similar. Like, I kind of grouped them together just because I think both of them are these mega on-ball half-court creators where they balance all-time volume scoring with all-time passing, and they just generate so much offense. But my big concerns with both of them are neither guy's really had that transition presence in terms of the ability to push the pace, get those easy shots, both as a playmaker and a scorer. I think both of them had it a little bit, but compared to the guys in my top 10, not really as much. And then also, of course, the off-ball play. I think both of them are capable off-ball players with the way they spot up and shoot, the extra passing, the slashing off the catch. But when you get into my top 10, it's legitimately elite off-ball players, and I think that just really matters when we're talking about championship-level offense.
I'm very upset that my guy James Harden didn't make it.
I wondered who you were talking about when you said isolation player. I was just
I knew it as soon as he said it.
Yeah, the greatest isolation player to ever exist. Yeah, that you make a lot of sense. I will.
And I'm a big Harden guy, man. I love Harden. It's just like he was actually so tough to cut because, like I said, I can see him as high as like 6 or 7. If the argument was, or if the question I should say was, guys I can start an offense with and build around, he'd be a lot higher on my list. But I think a few of the guys that I just gave the edge over him have that argument where it's like, my team's already built. Who can I plug and play?
I think I get that. I think you get to a point where, I mean, I know James Harden said he is the system, but it's like, at what point is plugging and playing these types of players? I'm not going to say names, but these types of players. I understand being able to fit into a system, but more often than not, the system benefits more from the system being built around them as opposed to having to get into it. So I think when I factor that in, I understand being able to fit next to other people, but fitting in as a piece of a system. Well, what system would there be that would be better than the system that is Harden centric? I guess.
Let me put it this way. This would be my argument for what you're saying. In the 2018 season, the Rockets were at their best when either CP3 was without Harden or Harden was without CP3. And that's why they staggered all of their minutes. And then when both were on together, they were just a really good, but not all-time great offense. Whereas I think you take, for example, a guy that I'm going to have on my list is Kevin Durant. You take KD, you want him on the floor with CP3 at all times. So these starting and closing units are just going to be mega juiced because of his ability to play off of the creation of another guy like CP3, or like what we're seeing this season with Westbrook when he went on that 20 or 30 game stretch as a legitimate point guard next to Jokic. Whereas last year, Westbrook and Harden, again, had to stagger because you can't really play those guys together. And even in 2020, they had to trade their center and use Westbrook as a screener to accommodate to Harden as a point guard. I just feel like there's stuff you have to do. I feel like those guys kind of handicap the type of systems you can go to because they force you to play a certain way because they're going to get 60 or 70 touches to maximize their value.
I think that's true. I guess I don't think that's as bad.
And
I know you're not saying it's bad.
Yeah. And I will say, I think specifically with Harden and Luka, because there's another guy that's going to be on my list, and you probably know who I'm talking about, that I think breaks this mold, and it's because he also added the all-time great transition play, whereas Harden and Luka didn't. So they not only dominate the ball, but then you are only playing in the half court. And transition offense is just so much more efficient than half court offense.
Yeah, you're making a good case. You're making a very good case. I will say I was higher on Harden than Luka. Personally, I just think the more gifted shot maker, the better isolation player, the mastery of pick and roll. I do think they both have. But I think the thing about Harden that was so like special to me is the isolation stuff came after the fact that the best way teams figured out to defend how to defend the James Harden pick and roll because of how dangerous he was with Clint Capella as the lob threat was that they had to switch because they couldn't play typical coverages. And that just spawned the greatest isolation player we've ever seen. He didn't come into Houston just being this isolation demon. he just turned into that because teams couldn't guard him in regular pick and roll coverage. So it's like there was really no answer for James Harden. So I will say I actually don't have him on the list. But I just so I'm doing
I'll tell you, this is how he gets when Harden
I
comes.
also didn't have him on the list, but I just feel when someone else says it
yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
So James Harden also didn't make it for me. He was also my toughest cut. Enough about James Harden though. John D, who was your toughest cut?
Outside of James Harden, I have Chris Paul as a name, and also Kawhi Leonard. I'm really high on 19 to 21 Kawhi Leonard, just the way he's able to play in the post, in the mid-range, his shot making ability, just being able to like finish around the rim, but also have like the ball control to finish around the rim through traffic. Those things really, I was really high on. And Chris Paul, man, I still feel like I'm a big advocate of Chris Paul, just the way he's able to play in the half court, whether it's pick and roll, whether it's manipulating lobs to threes or threes to lobs, being able to enhance Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan, because I just don't think DeAndre Jordan was that good. But if you play next to CP3, I think he enhanced DeAndre Jordan's game so much. And he's one of the best mid-range shooters I've ever seen at the position. So it was just tough because of the size. And I just don't think he can impact the game to the level of some of these guys can. So I kept Chris Paul off.
Is that who you were talking about, Tyler? I know you're a big Chris Paul guy. Okay.
I know I'm a huge Chris Paul guy, but I actually think he has a similar thing where he wanted to play slow and methodical and slowed down teams a lot. Even I think he was more transition inclined to New Orleans, which is when I'd say he peaked offensively. But no, the guy I'm talking about, and I feel like Mars knows who I'm talking about, is like, I'm going to grab the ball and I'm going to play 1,000,000 miles an hour every single time I touch the ball. And I saw Mars talking about him on Twitter the other day. So
I'm very high on this player. Very, very, very high. Okay, with all that being said, we've got our toughest cuts out of the way. John D, I'm going to come straight back to you. Number 10.
I had Larry Bird at number 10. I already talked about Larry Bird, so this is going to But just the way he was able to the way he was able to make shots and play out of the post, the way he was able to get to the free throw line off shot fakes and playmaking out of those shot fakes, it felt like he did everything offensively to where he could make a dump off pass and set the screen for the guy he made the dump off pass to, cut to the basket. He played phenomenal off ball and he was constantly moving off ball. And he elevated the Celtics to some of the better offenses in those eras. So I had Larry Bird at number 10. The reason I couldn't put him any higher because after watching Larry Bird back a little bit more, he wasn't the best finisher. And he was also he also struggled a little bit in the playoffs. Like he didn't reach that level of volume and efficiency in the playoffs. So that's what held me back from having him any higher on this list.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I had Bird 8th, and I basically had the exact same strengths and weaknesses. I think one thing that gets overlooked is that during those mid to late 80s, the Celtics were often on par or even better offensively than the Lakers in the regular season. They were right there with the Showtime Lakers in terms of offensive efficiency for like 4 or 5 years. And those teams weren't necessarily these stacked offensive units. They were starting 3 post players, often multiple non-shooters. And the function of their system was Bird's ability to move, shoot, and pass. I think on a short list of like these GOAT passing candidates with the way he would connect the offense and find those interior windows right off the ball, like moving and then connecting with it with just the sharpest easily the best extra passer ever. With the shooting and stuff, I actually think he's on a short list of like GOAT off-ball candidates with guys like Steph, Reggie Miller. Like you said, though, I think one thing that really limited him was the finishing, also just the sheer ability to get to the rim or the line. He didn't have that type of downhill pressure. Also had a pretty limited handle, so you kind of needed him to play more off-ball than some of these other initiators. So yeah, and I think that those are the things that showed up in the playoffs, and then you see it with the team offense. The team's offense was not able to keep up with those Lakers come playoff time, which I think is a function of some of Bird's limitations. So I landed on him at number 8.
I had Larry Bird also at 10. And he was like hopping back and forth for me between like as high as 7 and as low as 10. But basically it's everything you guys like already touched on. And there was just a couple other guys I think I'm just higher on, I think, than some people, or maybe I'm wrong, but I do appreciate actually that Larry Bird is getting some of the credit. I think Larry Bird's maybe become one of the more underrated players of all time, especially like around that time frame. And obviously, have the injuries and stuff late, but one of the best off-ball players of all time. And yeah, I had him wind up at 10.
I also had him at 8.
Okay.
So we're matching up. I think, to me, I'll say it now. I think the two most valuable skill sets of an offensive player are passing ability and shooting ability. Those are the two most valuable skills. I think there's a bunch of other skills that are extremely valuable, but those would be my two I would pinpoint. And I think Larry Bird is one of two players who I think has an argument to be top 5 ever in both of those categories. He probably isn't top 5 in both of those categories, but he could be. So that's why I'm extremely high on him. I do agree with what John D said about his touch at the rim. I think if you go back and watch Larry Bird, you'll see him smoke one wide open layup at least every single game. It's actually very interesting to see. I do think he did rely on his outside shot a lot. Part of that was because of the fact that they would have just had Mikal and Parrish parked on both blocks. So he did kind of have to just supplement that by coming off these little curls to the elbow and stuff. And being able to fit the ball through the tightest of windows where he is coming to the elbow and maybe 2 jumping him. And then he's finding those lay down passes. And I can't remember which one of you said it, the best extra passer in history. I do think that's a valid thing to say. Elite outlet passer. So he wasn't grabbing and going in transition, but he was throwing outlets. He's still sparking the break, creating the easy offense there. The issue I had was just not being able to manufacture the easy scoring opportunities. I do think he was a more flawed scorer. I think physicality could bother him. His handle was limited, and the touch around the rim just led to him relying on outside shots that could be quite volatile. And that's why I think he had some down playoff series. He also couldn't just be your primary offensive like ball handler and stuff like other guys could, which is why his offense hit another level when Dennis Johnson came in, because he was able to find him with these seals and when he's cutting back door and not overplaying all those things. So a few flaws, but overall just the value of his skill set I do think was enough for me to put him at 8. But we do have Sean's number 10. So I'm gonna go to you, Tyler. Who is your number 10?
My number 10 was Kobe. I think Kobe is someone who is a very weird player because when you stack up his regular seasons, especially numbers wise, I think guys like Harden and Luka get a clear advantage. But Kobe wins the playoff argument for me. And it's just the fact that his game was so robust and so versatile as a scorer, both on and off the ball, that you'd get deep into these runs and they'd be facing the toughest defenses, the most unique coverages. And he almost just felt inevitable. He wasn't going to hit the heights of some of these other scorers where it was like, or even playmakers where it's like, I'm going to give you 35 and 10 on 60-something% true shooting, and you're just going to be completely helpless. The only time I think he really hit that level was 2010 Western Conference Finals against Phoenix, where he was just, that was the greatest shot making display I think anyone has ever, probably will ever have in a series. But in terms of like the baseline he was able to hit consistently against the best defenses, it was just so easy to build an elite offense with him as your centerpiece, regardless of who you had around him. Like, I think it gets overlooked that the Lakers were going into those playoff runs, oftentimes closing with front courts of Odom, Gasol, and Bynum. Like, what kind of spacing is that? And you have a guy like Kobe who's still finding ways to get to the rim, get to the line, shoot 45% on every type of mid-range shot. And then also just this criminally underrated interior passer who's going to find the tight windows. Those laydowns to Gasol are just beautiful. Yeah, I think Kobe doesn't give you that same game-to-game consistency as a playmaker and scorer of a guy like Harden and Luka. But I think Kobe's one of the most scheme-proof players ever, where you just run out of answers and you just kind of have to tip your hat when he gives you 30.
So what led to him being 10? Why? What stopped him from climbing the list?
Yeah, for me, it's the fact that he just never hit those high. I think everyone above him either has this hyper efficiency as a scorer, whereas Kobe I do think he gets underrated in terms of his efficiency, especially in the playoffs. But the relative true shooting is still getting up to like +3, +4%, and it's topping out. Whereas most of the guys I have ahead of him are generating like this +8 or +9% efficiency. And then I think the second thing is, if they aren't these hyper efficient volume scorers, I think the guys above him were just flat out better playmakers and better, more consistent offensive engines. Because I do think the downside of Kobe being such a robust and versatile shot maker is that he had a tendency to look for those shots. Like I just had not really a debate, but a conversation with the guys at Nerd Sesh about Shea's status as an all-time great scorer. And we were talking about how Shea has a unique ability to just always generate a super easy shot for himself out of any situation. Whereas Kobe's superpower was the ability to make those difficult shots easier. He still wasn't consistently getting super easy shots, though. And I think everyone above him either consistently got those easy shots for themselves or created more of those easy shots for the guys around them.
I know you guys have Kobe. Yeah, so go ahead. Where did you guys have Kobe?
I had Kobe at 8. Once again, I just think the spacing is something that I factored in as if he can play with that and he can make those tough shots. I think you made a really good point about the passes to Gasol. I think he played well in pick and roll. And once again, he's one of the greatest shot makers I've ever seen. I have a bias maybe because Kobe is my favorite player of all time. So I don't want to get in too deep with it, but yeah, I had Kobe at 8. 06 to 08 were my years.
I did 06 to 10. I just kept the whole era basically. I had Kobe as high as 6 at one point, and I also ultimately settled on him at 8. I think just one of the, if not maybe one of the 3 just greatest tough shot makers of all time. To Tyler's point, like just makes them scheme proof. One, yeah, there was one other person. I'm like, okay. So one of 2, maybe if you want to say one, it's whatever. The downhill pressure that Kobe could force on a defense in his prime, especially, I mean, in this run that we're kind of talking about here from 06 to 2010 with all the negative spacing that we've already talked about. And I think if you look at the whole run, then I think you get those playoff runs like the Phoenix series, like Tyler talks about, the 09 run and the Houston series. Like Kobe's deserves to be on this. I had him at 8.
I had Kobe at 9. I think where I struggle with Kobe, because I know there's a lot of Kobe fans who are going to be in the chat right now and after the show mad. I think for me, I guess I'm maybe not as high on Kobe's peak as most people. I think what makes Kobe so great is the longevity of how long he was great for. I think his peak falls short of quite a few people personally, but I think the longevity is what propels him above them. He was great for so long. But peak-wise, I think you guys did kind of cover everything I wanted to say. I think one thing that does get understated because Kobe's seen as this isolation monster who was just great one-on-one. I valued his off-ball game more than his isolation game, personally. I just think the amount of ways in which he can be effective, or the amount of areas on the floor that he can catch the ball and be effective, and the way that you have to guard him with multiple defenders everywhere on the floor is a superpower in itself. Now, obviously, you deal with the issue of sometimes he's drawing 3 defenders and still shooting it. So you have to deal with that drawback. If he probably made the right reads, more often he may have been higher. But I think you guys all said it. One of the greatest tough shot makers ever. 1, 2, 3, wherever. Could shoot the 3, could space the floor in that regard. Very good at getting to the free throw line. Would be called a foul baiter in today's game, but great at getting to the free throw line. Good touch around the rim. Once again, amazing off the ball. Great feel with his bigs, whether that be high-low passes, lay downs, dump downs. All of those passes he had strong feel for. And he did get himself easy ones in transition, which I think did help his efficiency a lot. He wasn't the most efficient half-court scorer, but that was part of his shot diet. But he did get himself easy ones, which I do think helped him. And his resiliency in the postseason, because his shot diet didn't really change, because he was just taking the same bad shots wherever he went. The efficiency wasn't really dependent on the defense. It was just dependent on if he wanted to make shots. So you have that level of resiliency that not many people can match. So I did have him at 9. I just do think the drawbacks of some of the playmaking holes and then just the limitations on that, the ceiling of the efficiency, I do think held him back, but I did have him at 9. Next, all of you guys have the 9 spot available, but you might have different players or the same ones. I don't know. I'm gonna go to Sean. Who do you have at number 9?
Number 9. Oh, okay. This actually
we better get an explanation.
Right. I actually muted my mic, hit the side button. So I guess that's my mic telling me to not say the person. Might be a hot take, but I think, and Tyler kind of alluded to it earlier, talking about like transition offense and the value of being able to play fast and get as many quality shots as fast as possible while also being one of the all-time best playmakers and if you put him in kind of like a modern setting even as well, then you're looking at like a player that probably gets a little bit more credit, a little bit more respect than he currently gets, and that is Steve Nash.
Yeah.
Steve Nash.
Go ahead. I was going to say not a hot take at all. Go ahead.
I will say I have him way higher.
Okay.
But go ahead. Talk to me about Steve Nash.
No, just the fact that does Steve Nash get enough credit for the shooting ability because of the volume being a little bit lower?
Nope.
That's the conversation where I bring up like, okay, you put him into 2025 with the current principles and spacing, and if his volume is maybe like 4 attempts per game, you're looking at an 8, 9 attempt per game 3-point shooter that adds elite floor general passing and playmaking ability out of pick and roll in transition. Like I don't know what to say about Steve Nash, honestly. He's just awesome. And maybe 9 is a bit low. Maybe 9's a bit low, but he gets all the high quality stuff that any NBA offense in any era basically would want, and that kind of makes them able to bounce around to whichever era that you're currently in because of his skill set.
Yeah.
Mars, before you get started, because I know. Tyler, you mentioned something the last time you came on the show. You went back and you did like player evaluations on older players, and I was like, that's not a bad idea. So the first person I used was Steve Nash, and the more I watched him and the more I did my research, the higher I grew on him. Extremely efficient, one of the best passers we've ever seen, one of the best pick and roll candidates we've ever seen. Throughout his peak, he was maintained at a minimum of +7 relative true shooting. Just to be that efficient, to be one of the best pull-up shooters we've ever seen. I think the thing that draw people back from Steve Nash, because the first thing I hear when I say Steve Nash is one of the greatest offensive players we've ever seen, bro, he's only averaged 15 points per game. But if you were to up his volume, I would think he would be like 20 and 15 guy on a nightly basis if you play in the era that prioritizes threes a lot more than they did back in that era. He always pushed the pace. He's led like 3 or 4 top 10 offenses in NBA relative to relative offensive rating. So Steve Nash was somebody I've grown on. I had him at number 7, so I still might not be that high on him as Mars is, but I had him at 7. I had my years being, I think, 05 to 08. That would be my years for him.
And I think if you had to land on one, it'd be 07. I think 07 was the best.
The one year he didn't get the MVP. Crazy.
Yeah. When he probably had the best argument. He probably had the best MVP argument in 07. I had Nash 7 as well. But I think Nash would maybe be what I said earlier about Harden, where I was like, if there's any one guy I can build an offense around, Nash would maybe be my number 1. And it's just the fact, I think he is the second best player ever at pushing pace. We'll get into number 1 in a little bit. I think he's the second best player ever at pushing pace. And that just creates so much pressure. Like, this guy's always, no matter what, even off of made shots, this guy's just sprinting down court. It's why they got the 7 seconds or less name, and the defense could never properly set. And then it's like, if you're finally able to set against this defense, he's the best half court playmaker ever. The pick and roll reads like the ability to get to the rim, the 50% mid-range shooting. If you foul him, he's going to make 92% of his free throws. He's going to hit over 40% of his pull-up threes. It's just this ridiculous blend. Like what Mars said about Bird having an argument to be a top 5 passer and shooter, and he alluded to another guy. The other guy was obviously Nash. I think if I was making lists, Nash would be my number 2 shooter and my number 2 passer of all time. Maybe not passer. Number 2 playmaker, I should say. I think there's guys that are better pure passers. He'd be my number 2 shooter and like number 4 or 5 passer. We'll say that. But yeah, I think what you said, he actually led 5 top 10 offenses in NBA history and the number 1 playoff offense in NBA history. The 2005 Suns had a +17 relative offensive rating, which doesn't even sound real. I actually do have one pushback with Nash, and I don't think it's the scoring volume. I don't think it's the fact, like, I do think he showed the ability to consistently ramp up the volume. I think a great example is the 2005 series against Dallas, the revenge series. They took away all of his playmaking reads, switched, played him in single coverage, and he had like back-to-back 40-point games. He ended that series averaging like a 30-point triple-double over the last 3 games, is one of the most on 70% true shooting. Just one of the most absurd things ever. My pushback with Nash is I think all of these other guys in our top 10s were on two-way constructed teams and still led all-time great offensive units, whereas Nash spent his entire prime on teams that were specifically slanted towards juicing the offense. So what I mean by that is you look at the 2005 Suns, they had a plus 8.5 relative offensive rating, but only a plus 7.5 relative net rating. So what that tells me is to get to that offensive number, you had to then sacrifice the defense. And I think one of the reasons Nash was able to be so valuable as a playmaker is because he always had just this surplus of offensive weapons around him. Like in 05, he's starting with Joe Johnson, Sean Marion, and Stoudemire. Like that's just an absurd surplus of play finishers and guys that can play off the catch, extend those advantages. So I do think Nash benefits from that in a way that other guys didn't. Like we talked about the Lakers earlier with the way they'd start those three big front court guys and then Derek Fisher. I don't think you can put Nash into some of those situations. Or another guy I'd go to is the Thunder during the mid 2010s. I don't think you can go to those type of situations with Nash and get the same type of like go offensive value. So that's what just keeps him back from the top 5 for me. I think if I was building an offense from scratch and you could tell me that I could get all of these play finishers, I think Nash might be number 1. But if we're talking about a random offensive system and there's a chance that he might have to be my go-to scorer, I just barely prefer a few other guys in the top 5.
I haven't decided where Steve Nash is. I could tell you he's in the top 6. The top 6 for me was clear cut, and I don't know where he falls, but he's in there. I think what you said about the offenses being prioritized is a very valid point. The best team that's an example of that to me is the 04 Mavericks. Yep. Dirk Nowitzki at the 5 is very clearly some cheating to try and boost the offense. And that's definitely why they lost in round 1 that year. And I think Mike D'Antoni spoke about them moving Amari to the 5 was a conscious decision to try. They said it was for Shaq because they thought they was going to see Miami in the postseason. And they said they wanted to run Shaq out the series. So they went with Amari at 5. What's funny is they ended up getting Shaq a few years later. My biggest issue with Steve Nash is that I don't think he can play with like that post up big. He's not the greatest entry passer. That would be like, that's the only pass I'm not comfortable with Steve Nash making routinely. I think that's why they weren't that good with Shaq that year, because they were asking him to like be John Stockton in terms of just get the ball into Shaq and we play off of that. That wasn't Steve Nash's game. So I do think you lack some versatility in that regard. But I think he's the best half-court playmaker ever, like Tyler said. I do think he's a top 5 passer and shooter ever. I would probably, off the top of my head, I would probably say he's a top 3 shooter and top 3 passer. That's off the top of my head. And I think the value of those two skill sets, along with having one of the best handles of all time, he never picked up his dribble when he didn't have to. He didn't. And being able to play with a live dribble is extremely valuable. A player, for example, who I think didn't do that to the degree that they could have, would be like a peak James Harden, where when the blitz or the double team was coming, he would pick up his dribble and then he would just make the pocket pass 4-on-3. That stuff is valuable in its own right. But Steve Nash just evaded defenders. He was just able to keep his dribble alive and play 5-on-3, 5-on-4 by breaking those types of traps. And obviously he's dribbling around the paint doing these little circles for no reason that ends up turning into layups out of nowhere. He's also one of the best interior passers I've ever seen. And I think the ability to make half-court possessions feel like transition is extremely valuable. And I think that's why I'm high on Tyrese Halliburton these days.
Yes.
Being able to... Sure, I will do that. I haven't always been the highest on Halliburton, but then I was like, he's kind of like Steve Nash, just worse. So yeah, I think just being able to make half-court possessions, transition possessions, which are the most valuable offensive possessions, is extremely valuable. So I have him in the tier 1 of offensive players. For me, that list is 6 players deep. As the show progresses, I'll decide where I have Steve Nash in that group. But he's very comfortably in that tier 1. 05 to 07 was the years I chose. I think he was the best regular season player in all 3 of those seasons. I think the playoff stuff that they didn't win probably holds him back. But in terms of like how well he performed, he was great in the postseason every single year. His playmaking translated. When teams tried to take away his playmaking, he could score. When teams tried to play both, they got fried. Like there was really no answer for a Steve Nash-led offense, even though there may be some adjustments that were made that made the offense better than it was But in 06, without Amari, they still had a dominant offense, and they were playing guys like Tim Thomas. So I don't know. Yeah, Steve Nash is in my top 6. I can't tell you where he is, but I'm glad that all of you guys had Steve Nash. I know some people are going to be mad that the 15-point per game scorer who never won a championship is going to be on the list, but I'm sorry. On this page, if you don't like Steve Nash propaganda, just unsubscribe because it will never stop. Anyway, I haven't got 2 number 9s. I haven't got John D's and Tyler's number 9. I'm going to go to you, Tyler. Who's your number 9?
My number 9 is Kevin Durant. I think very specifically, it's the version of Kevin Durant right before the Jones fracture. So like MVP Kevin Durant, and then the season before that, the 2013 season, right after they lost Harden. I think we're talking about a guy whose scoring profile is just like something out of a video game. Like you look at what he was doing as a scorer, and it's almost laughable. I pulled up some numbers. In those 2 regular seasons, 13 and 14, he shot 75% at the rim on 5 attempts a game. 44% from mid-range on 9.5 attempts a game, 40% from 3 on 5 attempts a game, and 89% from the line on 10 attempts a game. He beats you in literally every way. Also was an all-time transition scorer, which I think gets lost in time because now he plays a lot slower. He was like basically a Diet Giannis in transition with the way he used his length and agility to attack defenses in a backpedal. I think he is the most, and this includes Steph, I think Kevin Durant is the most versatile off-ball scorer ever. And that just means the sheer amount of ways you can use him away from the ball, whether that's as a catch and shoot, whether that's off of screens or movement, whether that's as a cutter, and I also think he's the best ever at attacking closeouts off the catch with decisive just reads. The guy was an absolute freak of an off-ball scorer. And then you have a guy who you can run all of your offense through as an isolationist, whether that's mid-post, whether that's face-up. He also had some pick-and-roll stuff. I actually think his best read as a passer was the shovel to the short roll, which is something that didn't really get to be taken advantage of until Golden State because they had him playing in a front court of Roberson, Cantor, and Adams. Like, what are we doing, man? Like, Kevin Durant, and I think that gets so underrated because you look at the 2014 MVP season in particular, when Westbrook goes down, the second best creator on that team is Reggie Jackson. And he's the second best shooter on that team is Derek Fisher, who's playing like 15 minutes a game off the bench. They had 1 3-point shooter in their whole starting lineup. And this guy goes out there and averages 32 points on plus 10% efficiency. Like, and I just can't fathom how absurd it is that he doesn't need any spacing because he has unlimited access to shots over the top of the defense because he's a 7-foot ball handler who's an all-time great shooter. And it's just, it's so absurd. I think just as a scorer, I think you can stack him up against anyone in NBA history. And you could say, this is the easiest plug and play scorer ever. Like those Golden State playoff runs, nothing you could do. The thing that holds me back on KD compared to specifically a guy we just talked about with Nash, who I have over him, is that I think Kevin Durant had a very loose handle. So I think you kind of need a guy like Westbrook or just any lead ball handler in general to take that pressure off of him and get him in his spots. I think anytime, like you look at the 2013 series against Memphis, they plug the driving lanes and he just becomes a turnover machine. And I think that's something that is just very limiting compared to, like you said, a guy like Nash, who's never going to pick up his dribble, always going to pull 2 defenders wherever he goes and then create those layups. KD didn't have that ability to get anywhere he wanted in the defense with a live dribble, which then also limited him as a playmaker because he also wasn't some super advanced like skip passer or anything like that. So I think he gets hurt a lot by the spacing in OKC, but I still think of the guys in my top 10, probably the most limited playmaker. So that's just barely holds him back from being a top 5 guy to me.
I had KD at 10.
I had KD at 9.
Okay, so that's your number 9 as well. Let me just make sure I get that in there. Sean, did you have Kevin Durant?
Yeah, where'd you have KD at?
I had him at 10.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait. Okay.
So you have him at 7? 6?
I had KD at 7.
Okay, so okay. I'll speak on KD. I think everything you said I agree with. I think there's like 3 iterations of KD. You've got pre-Jones fracture, so pre-2015. Well, obviously not including like rookie and stuff KD. So like 2011 to 14 KD. Then you've got post Jones fracture KD, but pre Achilles, so like 16 to 19. And then you've got this new Kevin Durant that is just the greatest mid-range shooter that the world's ever seen. I think when I say Steve Nash is a top 3 shooter, the reason I don't say top 2 is because Kevin Durant is the other player that I put into that group. I think he is that amazing of a shooter. Catch and shoot threes, elite. The best mid-range shooter of all time, in my opinion. Off the bounce, off the catch, coming off screens, whatever. The one thing that holds him back is his pull-up threes. I do think that holds him back. But everything else, he is practically a perfect shooter with a shot that he can get off practically at any time. I think you did a great point bringing up the rim pressure and the transition play. I think he was the second best transition scorer in the league at that time. It was LeBron James, obviously, and then Kevin Durant was the next best transition scorer, getting a crazy amount of easy opportunities for himself, whether that be 10 free throws a game or the 6 or 7 transition points a game. He's generating 16 points of free throws and transition attempts. Then he has the shot that he can get to at any time in the mid-range. Then, like you said, amazing on the second side, attacking closeouts off Russell Westbrook's gravity, or even to a lesser extent, Reggie Jackson or whatever. And that season, 2014, was a year where when Russ went down, Kevin Durant practically was their point guard. He was bringing the ball up and he was dictating the offense. Now, that's not a role I want to see Kevin Durant in consistently, and I do think in the postseason you see the drawbacks of that. But him having the ability to do that as a secondary or tertiary player at 7 feet puts the defense in a tough situation. I do think the reason I have him slightly lower is I do think the handle was problematic, and I do think the playmaking was, especially at this time when we're talking about athletic peak Kevin Durant, I do think it was very limited. With the amount of reads he could make. Now, I don't think he was helped by the spacing. This is a time where Kendrick Perkins was his starting center. So we're talking about rough spacing. Serge Ibaka was really extending to like 15 feet at most at this point.
Yeah.
So the spacing wasn't great, but I do think he was too limited as a ball handler and playmaker to have him higher. I would favor Kobe because I do trust him more with the ball in his hands. I do think he's a more advanced playmaker. And I do think there was more volatility in KD's playoff scoring. I do think series like the Memphis series, or he's had a few series in OKC where you could really hamper his efficiency, where you're forcing him into these tougher twos with a strong contest, and he doesn't have the playmaking chops to really navigate that or to handle. So that's why I have him at 10. But definitely, I do think is probably underrated as an offensive player. So I can understand having him higher than 10, but I settled on 10. Is anything you guys want to say about KD?
You guys pretty much covered it. I mean, I think once again, he's been extremely underrated as a transition player. Once again, off ball as well, whether it's pin downs, facing up at the elbow, I also really liked, and just being able to shoot from anywhere on the floor. I think that's what made him really valuable. So I had him at number 9.
I just value that he's probably the most versatile offensive scorer of all time, on or off ball, honestly, in terms of you. With the, that's what made the fit in Golden State for him so perfect, was that, okay, we can, you'll still give you your on-ball touches, give you the stuff at the elbow, or, let you run pick and roll or whatever, but we can also run you off of pin downs, let you catch it and then face up off rip, and all the creative stuff that you can do with Kevin Durant offensively. I just value that a ton, while also acknowledging the fact that, yes, the handle and some of the playmaking limitations are the reasons why he's not in that tier 1, if you will. But I just value the fact that he's the most versatile scorer ever.
Can I
when did you guys have his peak at, real quick? Because you said 13.
Yeah, I said I had 13, 14 those 2 years.
Did everyone have the same time frame?
Yeah, I had 13 to 15 around that area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I throw some crazy numbers at you real quick about Kevin Durant's playoff scoring? So would you guys agree that in OKC specifically, 2012 was the most favorable offensive environment he ever had?
Yes, and I believe he was like a plus 11 that year.
Yeah, so listen to that. Listen, I just pulled this up because I knew it was crazy. I didn't know it was this crazy. 2012 second round against the Lakers, 27 points per 75 on plus 10% efficiency. 2012 Western Conference Finals against the Spurs, 26 points per 75 on plus 13% efficiency. Then the finals against the Heat, 29 points per 75 on plus 13% efficiency. That is the last 3 rounds of the playoffs, going through the Lakers, Spurs, and Heat, with plus 10, plus 13, and plus 13 efficiency. Just absurd scorer, dude.
Ridiculous. Yeah, he has for me, he's not the greatest scorer of all time, but I do think he is the most versatile scorer ever.
Yeah.
Now, I know that finals, for example, turnovers were a big problem for Kevin Durant. But the scoring efficiency, I mean, LeBron couldn't check him. Shane Battier really couldn't check him. But the turnovers were problematic. I do think that's my biggest gripe with KD. But I mean, I think Golden State KD, like he added the post game. At that point, he could play with his back to the basket. That turnaround jumper was more consistent. The spot up threes, he had more opportunities, and he was knocking them down at an elite clip. But you did see the clear burst regression.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
I think KD's a guy who really struggles with like his different parts of his game peaking at different times. Like I'm imagining you get like the pre-Jones burst with like the 2021 passing and the 2022 mid-range shot making, and then all the stuff he added in Golden State. Like now we're just talking about a guy who's just basically a perfect offensive player.
I mean, if we can make Super KD, I think he would be a lot higher on this list for sure. But we all did have Kevin Durant. Sean was the highest at 7, yes. And then we took 2 9s and 1 10. But now we do have 10 through 7 all filled out for everyone. So I'm gonna go to John D for your number 6.
This is where my list gets tricky. I have Shaq here at 6. Once again, I think Shaq is probably the most dominant player the NBA has ever seen. Just being able to move around in the post. I don't think people understand to where I think they think they're just giving Shaq the ball and they're just letting him go to work. But he was really good at positioning himself under the basket. Not only when he got the ball, he was extremely overpowering, but off ball, he could just push anyone to the spot he wanted to be and have the ball as quickly as possible when he got it to where he could catch it and just go straight up. I also do think he was really good at passing out of double teams as well, to where you can play a lot of spacers around him. This isn't in the peak I was talking about, or what I'm about to reference isn't in the peak that I'm referencing for Shaq, but those Orlando Magic teams with Penny Hardaway and I think was his name, Nick Anderson, was a lot of really good shooters around him to where he could space the floor. Dennis Scott as well. So I think that's an underrated skill of Shaq, and just being able to rebound and finish around the rim and just be extremely dominant to where you're going to have to foul him when he gets the ball. And it still is an efficient shot because what was he, like 60% from the free throw line? So he could still knock them down if needed. But yeah, I had Shaq here at 6. I debated him higher, but I left him at 6.
Yeah, Shaq was my number 6. And this is the guy I was talking about before the show that I said I think I'm higher than anyone on. And that's just because like the way I feel about Shaq. I actually was pretty close to getting Shaq. My top 5 is like the GOAT tier where all of them have a claim to be the GOAT. And Shaq was the guy that I was really debating bumping into that tier. Because I think like an absolute, like as high as you can get on Shaq, I do think you could probably make a GOAT offense argument. And I think Shaq's a really weird player where I think he gets a lot of pushback because he's not as complete as a lot of other guys. I think one that he gets compared to a lot these days is Jokic. You look at Jokic and there's just like so much more that Jokic does. But I think Shaq's argument is a lot like what we talk about with Steph, where he's so outlier at what he does good that the value that is derived from these singular skills, like the post scoring, the rim pressure, the instant decision making every time he touches the ball, the off ball stuff and the lob threat and offensive rebounding, the way he just breaks down entire defenses without ever touching the ball. You go back and watch some of them playoff runs. He's drawing 3 bodies and he's not even posting up yet. Like teams were signing dud centers just to get into the game and foul him. They were signing 7'3" bricks because they just wanted someone to foul him and not let him score a layup. It was such an outlier. And Shaq's one guy that I love talking about because it allows me to get really philosophical. So I'm going to throw a couple numbers at you that are just like, that always break my mind with Shaq. So we don't have exact half court and transition numbers before 2004, but what we do have is the 2004 playoffs. And consistently around that time, it looks like the average half court possession was worth about 0.8 to 0.85 points per possession, which means that a 50% free throw is worth plus 20 half court points per possession over 100 possessions. So basically teams were saying the best option for our playoff defense is to let Shaq produce a plus 20 offense because he's going to make 50 or 60% of his free throws. And then you get this team profile where Shaq's playoff offenses are basically the equivalent of what we talk about with Nash in the regular season. over the 10-year stretch of 1995 to 2004, 10 years, he led 5 number 1 playoff offenses, 3 number 2, 1 number 3, and 1 number 5. Always top 5, 8 times in the top 2. The worst playoff offense by relative offensive rating that Shaq ever had during those 10 years was the 2004 Lakers at plus 4.5. So basically, your baseline with Shaq on your team is you are going to have an elite playoff offense. And that alone to me was like, okay, I feel like I got to get into this GOAT tier because no one else has that. The only thing that just pushes him back compared to everyone in my top 5 is that Shaq's the only guy in my top 10 who's not an initiator. You need someone to get him the ball. And that's why you look at these guys like Penny, these guys like Kobe, a guy like Wade, who can get him the ball in those spots to maximize his value. And I think that just holds him back. And you see that at the end of close games in the playoffs where they're going to those perimeter guys because they don't have to get the ball in order to make their impact.
I hear you.
You said everything about Shaq I wanted to say. Go ahead, Sean.
No, I was just say I hear you. The initiator argument is a good one for basically everybody. It's not strong enough to keep me from having him 5. I'm 5.
Respect.
I actually kind of expect you to have Shaq higher. Personally.
Yeah, the other 5 I've just been so zoned in on as my top 5 offensive players for years now that when I started making this, I almost just penciled them in. I was like, these are the 5. Let's start the list at 6. I love Shaq, dude. Shaq's
awesome.
You like quite literally said everything I wanted to say. Because I had a debate about this last year, and I brought up the relative offense. The half-court offense and talking about the free throw stuff. And I remember saying a few years ago that the idea that fouling a 50% free throw shooter was a good strategy is like ridiculous. Yeah. Especially when you talk about the era in which it happened. Now, in today's game, I think it's probably more problematic, but we're doing relative to era. And I think one thing that I think no one has really brought up, like Shaq spaced the floor. Like he didn't shoot jumpers, but he provided spacing. Yeah. So like if Kobe Bryant drives and Shaq's in the dunker spot, you can't leave Shaq. Not only because he's a lob threat, but because if you leave him, he's going to get the offensive rebounds. He's going to get it. So he may not shoot jumpers and he may not shoot threes. And I've been very passionate that if Shaq could shoot threes, I think he would be worse. The fact that the fact that you couldn't leave his body provided spacing for his teammates. And then the fact that I think he is now Jokic is doing some ridiculous things off the ball these days. But him and Jokic are the 2 best off-ball centers I've ever seen. Like Shaq was relentless in what he was doing. Like he knew he was dominant inside 6 feet, but he did everything he could to catch the ball within 4 feet. Like he made sure that he fully bought into how dominant he was. And I think that was probably a big difference between him and a guy like Wilt. Wilt tried to play with finesse to prove he could play with finesse. Mm-hmm. Shaq was like, I'm just going to bully you. Like, I don't need to prove that I can make hook shots, which he could. He actually did have these hooks over, particularly over his right shoulder that he could go to. And he had a weird little turnaround jumper that looked hideous, but it went in. So he did have counters if his power game didn't work. But at the end of the day, there was no answer. The answer was have 4 centers, eat up some fouls, and hopefully you have one of the strongest players in the league, whether that be Tim Duncan, Arvydas Sabonis, Ben Wallace, that can just match the physicality as best as they can. And more often than not, they couldn't. And then you have the playmaking stuff, the strong playmaking stuff, like the passing, the physical stuff. Like when you double teamed him, he was comfortable making reads, especially off that left block. That there was no answer. No matter how people tried to slice it, you just foul him. That was a bad answer every single time. It was a bad answer. Besides, there was one postseason he shot like 45% from the line. That was bad. That was bad. I can't remember which year it was. It might have been his MVP year.
It was 2000. It was the MVP.
Yeah, but it might have been his MVP year. So like, besides that, because 0.9 points per possession in the half court isn't great, but it was still like +5, +6. So it was still cool. But Besides that, there really was no problem. And like in the postseason, he was getting like 5-6 offensive rebounds.
I was just gonna say that.
Like there's nothing you could do.
That's like Moses and Rodman in the playoffs. Like grabbing 6
Literally
offensive rebounds.
nothing you could do. Like if someone missed, he was gonna clean it up. If he missed, he was gonna clean it up. You have to triple team him. You're going to foul him. He's gonna produce elite offense. And those, for me, the peak is 2000 and 2001. Like once you get to 02 and stuff, I do think you see like a regression. But those 2 years, I've been very, like, we're talking defense included now. I've been very consistent. I will put that peak up there with anyone, literally anyone. I will happily make the argument that that version of Shaq is as good as any player to ever exist. Now, with that being said, I don't know where I have him. When I wrote my list, I had him at 7. But since I went on my whole diatribe, I've convinced myself he's better. So I'll get back to you guys. With that being said, Sean, we need to know your number 6.
My number 6 is Magic Johnson. I have Magic Johnson at 6, Shaq at 5. Some similar arguments that we've already talked about, just the ridiculous rim pressure and playmaking ability in the open floor and in the half court, the ability to make literally any single pass, arguably the best passer ever. And then honestly, I think some of the shooting or some of the spacing and stuff like that, I think you adjust him to a more modern era with more floor spacing. Like he's a guy that consistently averaged like 12, 13 assists or whatever, and 2 or 3 turnovers, but you put him in a modern system and modern spacing where he can be surrounded by elite shooters and elite floor spacers, but also be able to just push the pace of transition nonstop. Like Magic Johnson, it sucks that his they doesn't get enough. Maybe he does enough credit because of the missing 4 years or whatever, and kind of missing the later end of his prime. But Magic Johnson, what was that? I think 85 to 90, basically that whole run from Magic.
Yeah, Magic for me was the guy that I said I said Nash was the second best guy at pushing pace ever. Magic was number 1, and I don't think it's even remotely close. Like the ability to grab 8 or 9 defensive rebounds a game, and every single time those possessions are probably going to end with a layup. It's just it's absurd. It's absurd. I actually don't even think. I think best passer ever should be viewed how we view Steph as the greatest shooter ever. I think Magic was just a complete outlier of a passer. The tight windows he hit, like he checked every single box, from the creativity and flair to the versatility to the tight windows. Like the Lakers could put out lineups with 4 guys who can't even shoot a mid-range shot, and they're still going to have the best offense in the league because someone's going to be there for a layup. You could put 4 guys on both blocks, and someone's going to get a layup out of that possession. It's just crazy what he was able to do as a tight window passer. And I think what gets underrated with Magic is that by that 85, 86 season, especially going into like the early 90s, I think he really added a half-court scoring game that gets really underrated. Like the pick and roll, he added the pick and roll, and it was like, if you go under, I'm going to hit the pull-up jumper. I can hit the pull-up jumper. And back then it was mostly long twos, but it was a legitimate threat. Legitimately elite post scorer as well. Massive mismatch. Like if you remember the 91 finals, he was cooking Jordan in the post. They had to move Pippen onto him because he was just such a big mismatch for him. Also like a 90% free throw shooter or close to that. So you couldn't send him to the line, even though he was such a big mismatch. And so you have this guy who can balance. Shooter. Yeah, he can balance the scoring and the passing. I just view him as like a much upgraded version of Nash, where it's like I'm balancing the scoring and the passing, and I'm also 6'9", and I'm also doing it 20 years ahead of schedule. And there's just I just don't think the league had any answer for Magic. And you get these playoff, like in the final, there were some final series where he's like approaching 30 points per game over multiple games because the defense is like, all right, we're going to force him to play one-on-one. And I also think pretty underrated off-ball player too, because we look at everything with the passing, with the post scoring, we look at everything running through him, that we overlook the cutting and things that he could do in that little in-between space. So I think Magic was one of my 5 guys with a GOAT argument, and I ultimately landed on him at number 5. But like 1 through 5 is just all over the place.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in the half court as a mismatch attacker, just being able to have that good touch around the rim and to be able to abuse smaller guards that were guarding him, or just be quicker than some wings and finish around the rim. Once again, his accuracy when he was passing, he could pass people open, whether it's down low or just playing in transition, and just fitting the ball where like defenders wouldn't even anticipate that it would be, and then by the time the ball gets there, they're not ready to contest the layup. So I think that was valuable as well. I had Magic at 5 here. I had his peak as 87 to 89.
I think everything you guys said is true. Magic Johnson, I for me, when I look at these all-time great passers, Magic, Steve Nash, whatever, I try to like I've got the bird's eye perspective. I'm watching the game from the camera view. Then I'm trying to look and just see, okay, what pass is available. There's no one who has shocked me more where when I'm watching the game from my bird's eye perspective, he's still making passes I couldn't see. Magic Johnson is like number one in that category of just doing stuff I can't even see, and I'm watching the game from a camera. So I don't know how he saw it. Like the amount of, and I don't know why it was always to Kurt Rambis. I don't know why, but it was always to him. He was always just right under the basket, and next thing I know, oh, there you go, layup, and he blew like half of them. But like that ability to fit the ball through windows that some players are great at hitting the ball through tight windows. Some players are great at manipulating defenses to create windows. Magic Johnson did both at a level that I don't think anyone else really comes close to. The manipulation and then the accuracy, like it's really second to none. My only issue is like sometimes I think he like just overthrew people. Like I think he probably just threw it a bit too hard. But like other than that, like I don't really have a problem. He also wasn't like a Larry Bird-esque outlet passer, but he was just grabbing rebounds and going himself, so he didn't need to be. So those are like my only drawbacks with him as a passer. I do think like 87 to like 89, 90 is like the peak of Magic Johnson, because I do think the added set shot, jump shot, whatever you want to call it, was valuable. The post game was still really good. You couldn't guard him with typical point guards, and then you had to put wings on him, but he was usually too fast for them. And then he was now a threat in the half court. And he was also a good offensive rebounder, which was just an extra added value. So you add all of that, I do think he is a tier 1 offensive player. Then you look at the offensive results of the Lakers. Routinely the best offense in the NBA, routinely the best playoff offense in the NBA. And that's in large part because of Magic Johnson. His ability to push tempo, like you said. And then once he added that half court game, there really was no answer. Even in the 91 finals, I think Jordan overall did okay. There was one game he got in foul trouble, but I think Jordan overall did okay. He even made like a half court shot in that series. But like, yeah, there wasn't really any holes in his game, not relative to the time. Like, I'm not gonna be like, well, why didn't you shoot 40% from 3? Like, I'm not holding that against him. So there really was no holes in his offensive game. So definitely in that tier 1 of offensive players for me. Definitely don't appreciate you just saying he was Steve Nash but better, but like still an amazing
in a sense, like the offenses were in the playoffs. They basically were producing what the Suns were doing in the regular season, but they also had a really good defense, so they didn't have to like gear everything towards that. And granted, they had like 5 Hall of Famers, so it's a little bit unfair, but like yeah, they were like a +9. You could basically chalk them in as a +9 playoff offense for a decade. And Magic was at the 4, like he controlled everything.
Yeah, and definitely the best passer ever, in my opinion. And I don't think twice when people say that. I don't know if the gap is as wide as Steph and number 2, but definitely I see what you're saying when you say that. Just really no one really comes close to him as a passer, in my opinion. We have everyone's 5, so we are into everyone's top 4. Everyone has the same names, it appears. So the order will be up for debate, but everyone does seem to have the same names. I started with, I can't remember who I started with this time. I think I started with John D. I'm gonna go with Sean. Sean, who was your number 4?
This is brutal. Top 4 is brutal.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I feel like anytime it's a tough position, I just
feel like a hater. I just feel like a hater no matter who I say now.
Oh man, number 4 for me is LeBron James. Number 4.
Oh, you're definitely going to be called a hater. Okay. I respect it.
It's funny because like the LeBron, so I'll have like a tweet about Bron that's not even halfway negative. It's just not fully supporting LeBron. And it'll immediately be like, oh my gosh, Sean, you're a hater, or da da da, when LeBron's like literally my GOAT. But this is not a longevity discussion. I think I went with LeBron 2012 to 2016. So basically last 3 years of Miami, first 2 years of Cleveland for LeBron. Because this is where you get just peak athleticism of LeBron, where he is, and this is not Miami be peak athleticism version of LeBron, because if that's the case, I'd probably go like 2008, 2009. But you get still LeBron and like easily the best athlete in the league. But then also you start to get the consistency of the mid-range jumper. You have like the Boston series, the last 2 games of the Boston series in 2012. 2014 is arguably one of LeBron's more complete scoring seasons of his entire career. That's just easily the worst Miami Heat team he was on. So it kind of got overlooked, but this is right around the time frame in LeBron's career where he's still this all-time level passer. He's still this all-time level athlete, but he kind of has a more well-rounded half-court scoring bag that isn't just revolved around him being bigger, faster, stronger than 99.9% of the entire league. And then obviously all-time playoff performer. He's for me fourth.
I don't agree with the years you picked.
Okay. What years did you pick?
I would have gone. I mean, I want to get 14 in there for sure. But the issue is 2015 just sucked. Like, I don't know. I can't say it any other way. 2015 just sucked. So I probably would go just second stint in Cleveland, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
I think that's when he became like this S-tier mismatch attacker.
So it's 16, 18?
Yeah, 16 through 18.
Yeah. Okay.
I think 14 was his peak as a scorer, because I think that's when he really added the low post game, and that's when he also probably he was at his best, like balancing the shooting with the athleticism. But I think as an overall playmaker and game manager, I would say 17 or 18, because now you're getting like 45, 46 minutes of playoff Bron, and he's this all-time shot maker. Like, basically just the best half-court on-ball player ever, in my opinion, because it's like, I'm going to spam pick and roll. I'm going to spam mid-post isolations. There's literally nothing you can do. And I also have LeBron at 4, so I'm with you. I also feel like a hater for saying that. But you have to get so nitpicky when you get to these top guys. And I have just like a few things with LeBron where I think other guys get a slight boost. So one is that I think LeBron, alongside one other guy we're going to talk about, 2 of the guys this doesn't apply to, but LeBron wasn't as valuable of a floor spacer as some of the other guys I have above him, which means, and he was also a downhill creator, which means when you're constructing your roster, ideally you want that shooting big, which I think is when you have to get nitpicky. It's like other guys unlock more versatile roster constructions, I think. Whereas LeBron, you want that spread offense. You want as much shooting as possible for him to play in space, play downhill. And I think that also goes in hand with the fact that I do think LeBron at this time was a criminally underrated off-ball player, but still a noticeably worse off-ball player than the 3 guys I have ahead of him. And also the main thing that I think maybe gets gassed up a little bit with LeBron is that when he was in transition, I think he was the most lethal weapon ever with the way he balanced the scoring and passing. But I think people overlooked the fact that he wasn't actually trying to push the pace that much. He wasn't like grab and go all the time like he was in the first Cleveland stint. Like by this time, he was super methodical. He walked the ball up the court, wait for things to set up, and then get into his offense. I actually pulled the numbers back a few months ago per synergy. In the 2008-2009 season, which I think we would all agree is LeBron's best transition year, he was averaging 5.8 transition possessions per game. And those transition possessions are counting anytime he attempts a shot or gets an assist. Compare that to 07 Nash. Nash is almost at 7.5 transition possessions per game. So Nash was pushing the ball considerably more than the fastest version of Bron. And I bet if you looked at like 17, 18, I don't have the numbers in front of me, it'd probably be closer to like 4, maybe 5 transition possessions per game. And I just think
that seems high still.
You just have to get really nitpicky. And it's like, I look at the off-ball stuff. I look at the optimal roster construction. I look at the fact that he's a lot more methodical, wanting to play in the half court. And I just give the 3 guys like the smallest of edge above him.
I gotta give you one of those accounts.
In 2018, LeBron averaged 5.5 transition possessions per game.
Oh, so yeah, he was quite accurate. John D, where did you have LeBron? Or did you not have him on the list? We don't
Oh no, I definitely didn't have him on the list. But
yeah, makes sense.
I had him at number 4. My peak for him was second stint Cleveland. I do think as a post player, he got a lot better. Just being able to attack mismatches, basically what we've all been talking about for like the past 3 to 5 minutes. But his finishing around the rim, mismatch attacking, getting to the free throw line. The fact I just feel as though he could conduct an offense or do a lot more for an offense in this stint of Cleveland than he could in Miami, just because he was a lot better passer. He was still one of the best transition players in the league, and that converted to his teams as well. I always felt like LeBron-led teams were always some of the best transition teams in the NBA. I'm not 100% sure about that, but just off looking at it, it felt as though. So, and I think he did have some really underrated shot making, especially in the postseason, whether it was post fades, just deep twos, 3-pointers. I feel like that always escalated when he got to the playoffs, to where it's like, you haven't been shooting like this all year, and now we're in game 5 of the NBA finals, and now you're just taking these shots you haven't taken all year and they're going in. But yeah, I had LeBron at 4.
No Laker LeBron love? Nothing?
I can't do it. I can't do it.
I think LeBron is like, he mastered mismatch attacking. I think that's probably what makes me so high on him. Because like before LeBron was doing it, I don't know who was really doing it at the same level him and the Cavs were. Like, they were actively just hunting out bad defenders and making life so easy, forcing double teams, whether that be when they play against the Hawks and it's Jeff Teague, or the Warriors and it's Steph Curry, or it's Terry Rozier, like whoever it was. Basically, if you were 6'3" and under, you were going to be guarding LeBron. Like, that's what was going to happen. And then him just being able to back you all the way down to the rim. You send a double, he's making every read out of it. Like, in the half court, he was close to flawless, like in terms of his execution. Now, the issue was the jump shot was still just up and down. You'd have series where he couldn't miss. And then you get to the point where it's like, okay, well, this is the best offensive player we've ever seen. You can't stop him downhill. He's attacking every mismatch, and he makes every jump shot. What do you do? And then you have some series where the jump shot is just down, and it's like, okay, well, we'll go under the screen and we'll hope. And then you would still lose, but you had an answer somewhere. So that's my hesitation with Bron, I guess, is that there's a formula, which is
he's not as scheme proof.
Yeah, that would be, I mean, I think he struggled. Like, this isn't part of his peak, but I do think like the Spurs gave him some trouble because of things like that. And I do think the Warriors actually defended him quite well for the most part.
I still feel so wrong putting him at 4. Like, it feels so wrong saying.
Oh, the people are gonna let you hear it.
LeBron James 4th, like, it just like leaves a bad taste in the mouth.
Yeah, the people are not gonna be happy about this one. I'm gonna just say the same thing I said about all the top 6. I don't know where I have LeBron. This is the amazing thing. When it's my platform, I can do what I want. But I'll come up with a list as time goes on. I'm like listening to everything you guys are saying about every player, and I'm like just factoring all of that into my equation to see where I really have this all filing out. I do think I'd probably have LeBron higher than 4 though. But anyway, all you guys did have LeBron at 4. So I'm gonna go to John D now. Who is your number 3?
Number 3, I have MJ. I have MJ from 88 to 91. I think MJ had, especially this stint of MJ, his first step was ridiculous. The athleticism he had, the airtime, the speed, the way he was able to get to the rim and control his body when he got to the rim and finished around bigger opponents or more physically imposing opponents at the rim, and to have the ball control to kind of like find the best angle to finish at the rim was amazing. He was also great in pin downs and getting to the mid-range. He was one of the best mid-range scorers we've ever seen. That, and he's also a really underrated passer. I didn't love passing out of shots as much as the next guy, because I think that just led to a lot of turnovers. But I do think he's more of a passer than people give him credit for. I definitely think he's capable of making the right read. And if you're constantly putting that pressure on the rim and you're also a threat to score from mid-range like he was, to where you can't just give him any space because you know he's going to blow by you, he can also raise above you and hit that mid-range shot. I was extremely high on that. So I had MJ at 3 here.
Yeah, the MJ argument is so simple. You look at the playoff scoring numbers and you think you're looking at like a 2K stat line. It's the most ridiculous. This guy's like a walking 35 points per game efficiently against every single opponent, every single game, every finals series. He ramps it up to 40 points per game. The guy's just an absolute freak. All-time great. Sorry, that was just an undersell. By far the GOAT scorer. Like it's like you can't stop him from getting to the rim. He's arguably, alongside what you mentioned with KD, arguably the best mid-range scorer ever. All-time off-ball player, cutter, mover, all that stuff, played within the triangle offense to perfection. Also, I just think straight up elite passer. I just think it gets overlooked. I think it really gets overlooked that he was a genuinely elite. Like we talked about the interior passing reads, especially the way he'd use the threat of his jumper to manipulate defenses. He'd go in the air and then whip a bullet to someone under the basket, and it's just automatic layup. And he just demanded so much attention because back then, like we're talking about relative to era, so I'm not going to penalize him for the illegal defense. I'm going to address how the illegal defense forced teams to put like 3 defenders on him all the time. Or he was blowing by you into a layup or dunk because you couldn't zone up. So rim protectors weren't fast enough to keep up with his first step. They had to come double or else they were going to be late every time. And that's why he got so many posters. So yeah, I just think, I think MJ has a very strong argument to be number 1. I also landed on him at 3. And again, it's the nitpicking. I think the 2 guys ahead of him just created more offense for their teammates. And that's really just the deal breaker.
So I legit did not know where I MJ yet until like the last 45 seconds because I was going back and forth in my head. Like, I think the top 3 were pretty locked for 3 for me. Actually, I had Bron 4 and I felt really good about that. I'm going to ultimately end up putting MJ at 3 as well, only because of the last argument Tyler said. It was the deciding factor. The 1 and 2, assuming that at this point, like 1 and 2 is the exact same and it's no random you don't have a Bill Russell nod here for number 1. Then
defense, what's his offense?
Somebody on the screen might do it.
Hey, he sparked transition, the most valuable form of offense.
Because of that, I'm going to put MJ 3. But like there's really nothing else to add. Like GOAT scorer, unstoppable levels of rim pressure, GOAT mid-range score. Like there's really nothing else to add. It was more so just, do I want to put him 1 or 2, or do I put him 3? And I'm gonna ultimately put him 3.
You guys are a lot higher on the top 2 than I expected. I think MJ is the greatest scorer ever, and I think that should be consensus, especially like peak for peak. To me, that should be consensus.
Yeah.
I think the first step, like I'm talking about, like for me, peak offensive MJ, we're looking at 89 to 92, probably 89 to 93 if you want to like really show that Phoenix series some love. But for me, I'm talking about someone who is getting downhill whenever they want, is an all-time great mid-range shooter. They're not Kevin Durant, so like top 2, top 3, top 4, whatever. And I think there is no scheme for Michael Jordan. Not that Michael Jordan anyway. There isn't one. I do think, in particularly for one of these players who you guys have in the top 2, I do think there are things you could have done to him in his peak, or could do. With MJ, I don't think there's an answer. I mean, he could post you up. He was playing off the ball, elite off the ball, by the way. One of the best mid-range shooters of all time, like I said. Elite getting downhill, amazing touch. Got to the free throw line like a madman. And then very good interior passer. He elevated so high that he ended up creating passing angles that not many people had access to, just because of those jump passes that John D said he feels up and down about. Me too. I've watched John Wall enough in my time to see jump passes can be hit or miss. But making high leverage reads, did get some offensive rebounds, which I do think was valuable, especially as a 2 guard. Really good filling the lanes in transition. And there isn't a situation that he can't work in. He can initiate offense, but he can play off the ball. He does space the floor in the sense that you weren't leaving MJ to go in the legal defense side. You weren't leaving MJ to go double team someone else. Like MJ wasn't the one you left, because if you left him and you closed out, he's getting by you. So he provided spacing in that regard. To me, there's not really any flaws, especially relative to error, with MJ's offensive game. So I understand that we are nitpicking at this point,
Yeah.
but like everyone here was like we're talking about the best of the best, like really for like everyone in the top 10. But like especially once you get to this point, I do understand that. But
Can I
feel
say?
like
Can I say?
3 is a bit harsh.
I want to say two more things about MJ that are actually more positive. I think something that I wanted to mention, but I totally forgot about. MJ's style of defense with the gambling and passing lanes basically guaranteed like 6 easy points in transition because he's going to get 2 or 3 steals. And that's something that is just an offensive boost. The fact that he's going to jump in the lanes over and over again and pick up 2 or 3 steals. And then the other thing is what I talked about with, I talked about the contrast between Kobe and Shea, where Shea's going to create a bunch of easy shots for himself and Kobe's going to be a master of the difficult shots. And MJ was the one guy who I'm going to create all of the easy shots for myself, and I'm going to make all of the difficult shots easy. So my floor as a scorer is most guys' ceiling. And it's just, that's what leads to those stupid playoff numbers.
I think I lied. And I think I'm going to go back. This sucks. I think I'm going to go back and put MJ2. I think I'm going to put MJ2. I hate it, but I think I'm going to put MJ2.
So whoever you move to 3 now, you're a hater of. That's how it works.
That's how it works.
That is how that works. So I'm actually going to put you on the spot. Who did you just move down?
Steph Curry.
Ooh.
Steph Curry's 3.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
Somebody in the chat mentioned, I think when we were having the LeBron discussion, and it was like peak for peak, is Steph more scheme proof than LeBron? And I think the answer is yes. I think Steph is more scheme proof than Bron. For the simple fact being, like, there's going to be like a level of of hope, like you said. Like, it's not saying Bron is like you can scheme for Bron or whatever, especially his peak. But like there is a level of hope or whatever. Like, oh, we're gonna go under the screen and just hope they misses the shot. And to Mars's point, like, yeah, you'll probably still win, but there's somewhat of an option available to you with LeBron. I would argue that peak Steph, there really isn't an option because Steph is the best mover without the ball ever. And they literally have orchestrated a decade plus long offense around Steph's movement and you being scared to death of Steph moving without the ball. And then that just leverages it to him being the best shooter of all time. He's a all-time great playmaker. The fact that he can operate a pick and roll and, get to the floor, get to the rim. He's a really, really good finisher at the rim. Insane cutter. And sure, I think he's a somewhat product of the system that was built in Golden State, but he is the system in Golden State. And he's not this isolation hunter that some of the other guys are, but he's not bad. He's still a very, very good isolation scorer. And then the fact that he is the catalyst of what's been a decade long, successful offensive system built around the fact that he's the greatest 3-point shooter of all time. He's the greatest off-ball mover of all time. And he's an all-time great playmaker.
So I think it's time to have this conversation because I think Mars knows what I'm talking about. I had Steph at number 1.
Okay.
I had Steph at number 1. And when I look at Steph, man, his box scores will say like 27 and 6. But when I watch Steph, is like there's no way he's not getting like 12 assists a night. Because there's countless times on the floor where Steph is like, look, there's 4 guys on the opposing team that are paying attention to me. This guy's going to cut and they're all going to be looking at me. That's Steph's assist. Or like in game 1 of the 2017 NBA Finals, Kevin Durant gets back-to-back untouched, unpicked up transition points because Steph Curry is running right next to him and there's 2 people collapsing on Steph Curry. Those are Steph's assists. Being able to constantly get switches and pick and roll, being able to have the entire defense worried about what you're doing on ball. And it won't matter if Steph doesn't make a shot for 2 weeks straight. They're going to guard him like he just made 40 straight. Like, that's insane. That's insane. They're going to create easy. It's going to create easy offense by just moving off screens and being on the floor. Steph being on the floor is constantly going to make easy drives, easy cuts, easy finishes around the rim. Throughout that peak of Steph Curry's career, the Golden State Warriors led the league in assisted shots at the rim. They led it every single season. And number 2 was actually Cleveland too. So shout out to LeBron. But I think Steph just being able to create shots for others the way he was able to, and just having that I can shoot better than anybody else can do anything in basketball. And in the time where that was starting to rise up and that was starting to be extremely dangerous, I think it makes Steph have the greatest offensive peak in NBA history because offense just became seamless. Getting switches, playing in transition, getting guys open, and it all comes with just him being on the floor. He didn't have to do much to generate great offense.
Yeah. I think the argument against Steph would be that he can't physically impose himself on an offense like the other four guys we all have in this tier. I think one guy we haven't talked about yet is just huge. So we'll talk about that.
Bill Russell?
One guy's just huge. He's a big old body, so he's going to physically impose himself. One guy had the best first step ever. The other guy was huge and ridiculously fast in a straight line. Steph didn't have that singular
athletic trait
or physical trait that he could just impose himself. And so I think you do run into a series like Houston where they're switching everything and he's not the same type of mismatch, or like Cleveland in the 16 finals, just bumping him every time he runs around off ball, playing super physical and taking him out of his comfort zone. Granted, I'm pretty sure he was hurt in that series and that kind of gets overlooked, but I think that would be the one argument against Steph. The problem is nobody comes even remotely close to causing the amount of panic on a defense that Steph did, because a 40% three-point shot is 1.2 points per possession. And that is a shot he can get to the moment he steps across the logo. And it is off ball. He's shooting like 46% on catch and shoot threes. He's shooting like 43% on pull-up threes. He's shooting like 42% on contested threes. Wide open threes, I think from that 3-year stretch, he was like 50% on wide open threes. So leaving Steph open is like giving up a 75% shot at the rim. So the amount of panic that comes with Steph Curry running around, coming around screens, coming off of a pick and roll is just unlike anything, even to this day, like right now, unlike anything we've ever seen. And I think what gets somewhat overlooked is that as times passed, we forget how different the league was then and how rosters were constructed. Teams were starting 2 7-footers. The power forwards were also drop bigs. So now you have a guy who, think about what Steph's doing right now, and imagine that if teams had 2 slow-footed 7-footers that were getting pulled into every action. And it's like, now my offense has an advantage every single possession. If you put 2 on the ball, Draymond's playing 4 on 3, and he's the best short roll player before Jokic. And it's just like every single possession, the team has an advantage. So like you said, you look at Steph 27 and 6, and it probably on hyper efficiency too. Let's talk about the fact that in the 2016 season, he was 13% ahead of league average true shooting, shooting 45% from 3 on 11 attempts a game. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But Steph caused a level of panic that we've never seen. We've never seen, and you talked about it, Sean. The way he balanced that with like elite change of direction to attack bigs in space, get to the rim, like touch on layups only rivaled by really Kyrie from small guards. Just ridiculous touch. Had the floater, had the mid-range pull-up. He was shooting like 47% from the mid-range during those years. Yeah, I just think he broke the game. I just think he broke the game in a time where defenses did not know how to defend that. And I think if you took like 2016 Steph and put him in the league right now, I think, Tony Parker. Someone just said Tony Parker. That's another guy. That's another guard with all-time touch. I forgot about him. If you took 2016 Steph and just dropped him in the league right now, I don't think I would have him as my GOAT offensive player, because I think teams are better equipped to defend that now. But if we're going relative to that time, nobody knew how to defend that. It was such a game breaker. And my selling point on Steph over these other 3 guys is that he unlocked roster construction in a way we've never seen. It is unfathomable that the 2022 Celtics were like a top 5 defense of the 21st century. They were like a top 5. They were just damn near flawless across the board, 1 through 5. And they shut down KD in the Nets. They just blitzed the East with their defense. They get into the finals. The Warriors are starting Draymond Green and Kevon Looney together in 2022 against the best defense, and they cannot get a stop. They can't get a stop. They try drop coverage. Steph goes for like 45 in one of those games. They try blitzing, and they're getting a layup every possession. It's just, it's absurd. And that's not even peak Steph. That's not even. It's absurd. It's absurd. Steph was my number one. I actually had Jokic number one before we started recording, and then I was like selling myself while we're talking about it. I'm like, Steph just broke the game. He just broke the game of basketball.
That's what I'm telling you. I was up till 3 a.m. last night, and I'm just looking. I'm like,
dedication right there.
I can make the argument. So I was like, you know what? Twitter sleep. Let me just get this out because I probably may not be able to do this on the pod. But I'm like, you know what? Let's just bring it to the pod. Why not? I'm really high on Steph.
All of you guys are. I mean, I think I'm quite high on Steph. Maybe not as high as you guys, but I think I'm quite high. I guess I'll be the bad guy. The reason I hesitate with Steph is I think the point about roster construction, I do think is a great point. Is very, especially in today's game, the fact that the Warriors have been employing and starting multiple non-shooters for multiple years now, and Steph is still creating elite offense when he's on the floor is a testament to the fact that he does things to defenses and makes players viable that wouldn't be viable elsewhere. I agree with that. I think that's a great point about Steph. And the fact that 2016 Steph was so ahead of his time in the curve, I agree with that. And that's my biggest selling point with Steph. And I do think he might be the greatest regular season offensive player ever. But I do think in the postseason, I do think there were limitations. I do think switching defenses slowed him down and the Warriors down a lot. I would go to Houston as an example of that. I do think Kevin Durant kind of broke that because he was the switch solve. But Steph himself, I don't think was. I also think the Warriors didn't have the best offensive results in the postseason, as maybe is what people would expect. More often than not, they were a better defensive team than an offensive team. Shout out to Draymond Green. So I think that probably holds Steph back somewhat, but then you also factor in the roster construction. I think obviously the best shooter ever. And what he did to defenses was insane. But I do think not the counter, but the way to handle that version of Steph, it sounds simple, was quite simply communication. The reason Steph broke defenses was because he forced a lot of miscommunication. But if a team is fully locked in and fully engaged and communicating well, you can slow him down. The Rockets slowed him down twice, 2018 and 2019. One of them, he was coming off a hand injury. So, like, you can maybe be like, that might be part of it. But 2018, they slowed him down because they were just on a string and engaged. And they didn't have the breakdowns that the Cavs had in the finals, for example, that John D alluded to. Kevin Durant getting those wide open layups in transition is a testament to Steph. But that happened not because they were more worried about Steph than KD, but because Steph caused the miscommunication that led to them giving up a dunk. Does that make sense? Like, no one in their right minds is saying, I'm going to guard this Steph 3 over a Kevin Durant going to the rim for a dunk. But because everyone's so worried about Steph and they miscommunicated, I think it was J.R. Smith and it might have been LeBron.
Yeah,
both of them went to Steph because they didn't tell the other one to stay with KD. That's what Steph does. He scrambles your defense. But if you're engaged and you're communicating, you can.
But I think that's the argument for Steph, though, because I think what you're saying makes sense. But because they're in such a panic, it's like they go into fight or flight. It's like, oh my God, Steph's open. We got to go get him. And then 3 people run through him, and then you get a layup. And I just think that's an argument for Steph because he did it to the best and smartest defenders. Like Pelicans, Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis, 2 of the smartest defenders in the league, just absolutely helpless the moment he crosses half court. And it's just like, I just think even Houston, I guess Houston changed a lot once they got D'Antoni and got all those defenders, but he absolutely blitzed them in 2015. He obliterated them in 2015. He shot 49% from 3 in that series.
He only shot like 80% from the free throw line, so he's.
And then also like the Spurs. Every time they played the Spurs, like he has a series against the Spurs where he averaged like 35 points on 70% true shooting.
2017,
I think so. And you look at the Spurs, that's a Greg Popovich coach team with a bunch of super smart defenders. And I just think like it's the panic. It's the panic he causes. Like you said, the miscommunications happen because when you're in fight or flight and you see Steph on a 3-point line with nobody on him, you're not thinking to communicate. You're thinking, I need to get to that guy before he shoots the ball. And then he has, I think actually Ben Taylor from Thinking Basketball tracked it in his peak Steph video. From catching the ball to releasing the shot, I think it was 0.5 seconds. So it's like you can't let him catch the ball or the shot's up.
Yeah, I also think this is obvious. There's a level of volatility that comes with any 3-point shooter, even Steph Curry. And he was liable to have, like, at least once every series, the game where he goes 1 for 9 from 3 and he scores like 14 points. That, I think the floor was lower with him from a points per game standard, not like the impact, the intangible stuff. That stuff was pretty much always there in most series. But I do think there was a level of he's gonna have a bad shooting. Like even in the 2022 finals, that game 5, when they started blitzing him, he shot like 0 for 9 from 3 that game. Now they obviously still won. I think their offense was actually better that game because they unlocked the 4-on-3 stuff. Or the 2018 finals game 3, that game was just bad. Like we can call it bad game. He's more susceptible to those types of games. Absolutely.
And you know what? On that Steph point, I actually think it's an absolute travesty that we never got to see him in the 2021 playoffs because I think that's the version of Steph that had the least amount of volatility. I think that version of Steph was just so consistent because of the added strength. Like I really wish we got to see.
If you don't do relative to era, I think 2021 Steph is the best he was. Like
even just as a scorer, like as a complete scorer, I think that is the best he's ever been as well.
Yeah. If you're like 2016 to me is the best Steph because, like as you said, like we're running 2 bigs who can't move. Like he's
we got Andre.
But if you aren't adjusting for error, like you aren't doing relative to error, I do think 2021 is his most complete self offensively. I do think the isolation game leveled up. I do think the on-ball game in general leveled up. And I think the shooting ability, just off the fact that he was seeing the more modern coverages to what he was doing and still being that efficient, that elite. And then that month for April, whatever he was doing was just superhuman. I do think that might be the best he ever was, not relative to error. But I do think there was just, and I also think one thing that limited Steph is the rim finishing, the interior scoring in the postseason did regress routinely. I was looking at some numbers here. Now, some of it you can say is 2016 injuries. But in the finals, 48% of the rim. In the conference finals, 45% of the rim. In 2017, in round 1, 41% of the rim. In the finals in 2018, 58% of the rim. Like, that's not great. It's not ideal. I'll say that. 56% in the second round in 2019. Like, questionable rim finishing numbers.
Yeah.
That you're not getting the easy ones. He also has a questionable whistle, so he doesn't get a lot of free throws. Makes him at like 90%. So still valuable that he's getting like 4.5 points a game on that. So like I do think when you're susceptible to the level of volatility that Steph is due to the high volume threes, and you struggle around the rim in certain series and matchups, and you're not getting to the free throw line a whole bunch, and you are a limited passer with very questionable decision making, I think that's fair to say Steph is liable to make some bad decisions.
Yeah.
That I would probably have Steph at 4. Maybe 3.
I think it's fair. Like I said, I think my 1 through 5 is like you could flip them any order. I went with Steph at 1.
I definitely see the argument for Steph at 1, especially like I said, I think he's the best regular season offensive player ever. But I think now I'm talking myself into it. I think I'd probably have Steph at 3.
But also one thing with Steph too that I think is not underrated. None of us have brought it up is along with the other guy we're going to get to next, probably the easiest player ever to fit with any archetype of player.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of gets like the 2016 Warriors, a lot of those teams didn't have a lot of shooting threats. Like he was the spacing. Him and Clay were the spacing. Like he'd be in lineups with Iggy, Draymond, and Bogut. And it's like
2016 Draymond was the sniper.
Well, I was going to say Draymond was a capable shooter at that time, but still defenses weren't like scrambling to close out on Draymond.
I think, I really don't know what I'm going to be honest. I really don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm looking at, I've got all of you guys' lists filled out, and then I'm looking at whatever I've got. Like it's not, I've got 10, 9, and 8, and everything else is like I'm not sold on it. So we'll get to that anyway. But there's one player left to discuss, and it is Sean. I think you're number one. So go ahead and talk to us about Nikola Jokic. I'm assuming that's your number one. I don't want to.
Wait, no, I thought it was Shea.
Yeah, I don't want to jump the gun.
I thought it was Luka. You know, he did drop 30 today, I think. And
hey.
Yeah, so yeah, I shouldn't have jumped the gun. If you have Jerry Stackhouse, go ahead. Just whoever.
Yeah, it's actually Mario Chalmers at number one. Bummer. Oh yeah, Jokic for me is one, and I still don't feel great about 1 through 3. Honestly, I even think I'll respect Braun 1 through 4. I don't feel great about. You could probably I'll indulge and give Braun his respect. No, seriously, I hate how 1 through 4 is. I think literally you can 16 different combinations because it's 4 players. So I think any of the possible combinations of players, I think I'd be pretty all right with. But the thing with Jokic, and I'll start off because Tyler threw me a lob. The fact that he is so easy to just pair with literally any skill set, arguably ever, is so important. Even like if you put him like in the mid 2000s where he's like a 4, you're pairing him next to another big, his short roll playmaking and the fact that he can just operate out of the post, operate out of the short roll or the elbow area, and be a all-time level decision maker. While also being the stupid narrative that was going on in the 23 playoffs, I think was, do we let Jokic be do we force him to be a passer, or do we force him to be a scorer, or the stupid talking heads thing. And I think Spo was this the year Spo got super pissed off at it. He like addressed it in the media like before the finals or something. And is that
so. Yeah?
Okay,
I think so.
And the thing is, there really isn't like an argument for it, because if the argument is, okay, look, we're gonna force Jokic to be a passer or whatever, okay, he's still gonna like get his efficient 25 plus. Like there is nothing that's going to stop Jokic. There's nothing to stop Jokic from just flat out getting his 20 to 25. Besides the fact that he just goes, I don't know if I really want to score right now. And I think me and Tyler even talked about this at the beginning of the year, how we really wanted to see Jokic ramp up his volume, and he has his highest volume season scoring wise, and he's had one of the best scoring seasons ever, and easily the best scoring season of his entire career, while still being this unstoppable playmaker. And I get the point about him not being an initiator, but at the same time, there's only been very, very few, more than 1 or 2, maybe even scenarios where a team has been able to make the fact that he's not an initiator a major problem. So like what Shaq lacks in the fact that he's not an initiator, it doesn't matter with Jokic. And then he also has the all-time, he just has series. And as a Laker fan, it hurts. But he just has series where he could just become the best shot maker on.
I was going to say that, bro.
It's hard to pick at Jokic for me, at least. And that's why I have Jokic at 1.
Yeah, I think the big selling point is this year's 3-point shooting, because I think last year Minnesota kind of found something where they were going under all of his screens. He attempted like 11 threes in game 7, only made 2 or 3 of them, and they kind of found something there. But then it's so crazy to me. I guess the selling point with Jokic is Minnesota figured him out. That was the series where he was figured out. That was his kryptonite, and he still walked away with 29, 11, and 8 on 60% true shooting. Like, that was the bad series for Jokic. He generates so much offense. I think he has the best combination ever of on and off ball presence, with the screening and rolling, the cutting, the criminally underrated floor spacing, because he's always going to pull a 5 to the 3-point line for most of the offensive possessions. And then, of course, the offensive rebounding. He's capable of giving you 3 or 4 offensive rebounds, and those are pretty much automatic putbacks. I think he's in that Mount Rushmore of passers. I think he's an all-time great post-up scorer who can access 60% shots on demand, especially
How dare I not bring up that.
Yeah, the touch shot out of the pick and roll is just a game breaker, because now he doesn't need spacing. It doesn't matter how much you pack the paint if he's going to shoot 60% on 10-foot floaters. I just think, I think he's the most complete offensive player ever. And I think the fact that you can pair any shot creator with him boosts his offensive value to another level, because shot creators are typically the most valuable offensive players, especially when you get down to like that all-star, all-NBA level. Like, I'm talking about like the Trae Youngs, the De'Aaron Foxes, the Tyrese Halliburtons. Like, when you get into those tiers of players, those are typically the more valuable offensive players than play finishers or connectors. And Jokic can play with every single one of them. It's just so easy to pair him with every single one of them. The only problem that I would say he kind of runs into, and we saw it in the 2022 playoffs against the Warriors just a little bit. And again, it's super nitpicky. It was the only reason.
On, by the way.
Yeah, it was the only reason I didn't put him at a definitive number one. And it's the fact that I do wonder if he relies a little bit on having that playmaking presence to get him the ball where he wants it. And you kind of hinted at it with, it's different than Shaq because he can play point center, but he's still clearly way more effective out of the post than he is playing point. And you look at like that recent Lakers game where they fronted everything away from the ball and cheated over. And that's obviously some gimmick defense, but I do think that is something that teams will start to lean into more. Like we saw it with the Celtics and then we saw it with the Kings. I do think it's something that shows up a little bit more with Jokic and limiting his touches than you get with some other guys that are capable of playing point guard more effectively. So it's super nitpicky, but I ended up with Jokic at 2. Like I said, I had him 1 right before the show and then just bumped him below Steph for number 2, but any one of those guys can be the offensive GOAT.
Yeah, you can make a good case for all 5 of them. You can make a good case for all 5 of my top 5.
Really quickly, going back to that
I
Jokic
just decided
series.
to put Jokic 1, by the way. I just decided that.
I won Mars over. That's a win. Don't get a lot of wins around here. I will take that. By the way, that Jokic series that you referred to in 2022, 31, 13, and 6 on like +8 efficiency.
And I think the turnover, I think I remember the turnovers. Were the turnovers high? I feel like the turnovers were a little bit high in that series. I can't remember.
Maybe like 4.
And then I remember he shot really bad from 3.
Yeah, 4.
But I also remember he had figured them out. He had figured them out by game 3. In games 3 through 5, I think he was 35 points per game on 70% true shooting. So, like I said, it's
after game 2, everyone was praising Draymond, like, oh, he's holding Jokic to whatever the percentage, and then he just torched him the rest of the way, but lost, so it doesn't count. I want
the turnovers, and sorry to cut you off, but in those last 3 games, 5, 7, and 6 turnovers. So very high turnovers with the scoring efficiency.
I think the reason I go with Jokic 1 is I do think, he's shooting whatever he's shooting from 3 right now. I don't know what he meant to do with that. I remember when he started the season like 48%. I said it would come down to earth. It's 42%, and he shoots more heaves than anyone. So it's really like 44%. So the 3-point shooting definitely, I think, makes this like more clear to me. But when he was just a good 3-point shooter, one where that was the game plan. It's like, okay, we'll dare him to shoot and we'll live with the results. I think the reason a lot of that works is because I think the roster is flawed. I don't think, like, if we're talking about Jokic just as he is, his skill set, I think he makes a lot of guys who are questionable offensively more viable than they are, kind of like Steph Curry. Where in an ordinary offensive situation, I do think you can't run the defense the Lakers ran, for example, or that the Kings then followed that up by doing. You can't do that in an ordinary situation, but you're playing him with Aaron Gordon, who decided that he can make threes, but he still hasn't commanded that respect. Russell Westbrook, who definitely hasn't commanded that respect. Michael Porter Jr., who can't do anything with a live dribble, like can't do anything. Jamal Murray, who is a really good shot creator. We give Jamal Murray his credit. But like with a roster that flawed, I do think whatever flaw you may find within Jokic's offensive game, I do think is probably more enhanced than it would be in an ordinary offensive situation. I do agree that as any big, you probably do need someone to get you the ball in those spots. But it's harder to get Jokic the ball when he's being fronted by one player and then another player's on his back and then someone else has already overloaded the strong side. It's like, yeah, it's probably going to be harder to get that guy the ball, but in any other situation, he's not being guarded like this. So I think that's why I'm probably higher on Jokic. I don't view that as much of a flaw personally. I just think it's a situation thing where the Nuggets have failed a lot. And then I do think the value just away from the ball is amazing. Like they're running sets like he's Rip Hamilton, like to get him open threes. It's ridiculous. And then he's amazing in the short roll. He's amazing just as that hub, like you said, at the top of the key. The floater stuff, I do think he has the best touch ever. I think that's probably at this point in the modern NBA, I think that's the most valuable shot in the league. if you're able to get that routinely
100%.
because teams are taking away the rim, they're trying to take away threes. The mid-range has, some people think analytics have killed the mid-range. I disagree with that. But if you're able to get into that painted area and you're converting 58, 60, 62%, there's nothing you can do with that. Then I think he's the best or the second best post scorer we've had in the last 25 years. I think he's the best or second best passer we've had in the last 25 years. And he's an amazing offensive rebounder. He doesn't hold the ball doesn't stick with him, but he touches the ball more than anyone. But everyone else is also getting the ball, staying involved. I don't see a drawback with Jokic's offensive game personally, and I think that's probably why I have him number one. My only issue with Jokic would be that we haven't seen the all-time offensive production from the team standpoint. Like the Nuggets don't produce like the Phoenix Suns with Steve Nash or the Showtime Lakers or those types of teams. But then even that, I would refute myself by saying, well, when Jokic is on the floor, they're the best offense in the league, like all
That's
the time.
what I was gonna say.
So it's like,
yeah,
even when I'm trying to nitpick, it's like I'm countering my own nitpicks with like what should be common sense. So like I think he's number one. That's where I stand on this. I think he's the best offensive peak we've ever seen.
It's fair.
And I don't think there's really.
I was gonna say, I think that's super fair. I think, like I said, I think he's the most complete offensive player ever. Like I think other guys you can highlight and nitpick, and it's really hard to nitpick with him. It's just he just does everything at a high level.
Yeah, so I settled with Jokic at number one. That does conclude. I also want to say shout out to Oscar Robertson. None of us had him.
I had him as an honorable mention too.
But shout out to Oscar Robertson.
I had him and Jerry grouped together, and to me it was
I think
just
you texted me about them.
Yeah, I texted Sean. I was like, I almost had Oscar and Jerry. The only drawback I think is that era was so juiced towards defense that I just don't even think you could have enough offensive value to get on this list.
Yeah, that was my thought process. I just think I had a similar gripe with the early 2000s, which is why the only one who made it was Shaq from that era. Because I just think that was a defensively slanted era, so I do think it was hard to produce that level of offensive impact. But Oscar and Jerry, I do think are all-time offensive greats. I think Kareem is one as well. So there were some players from yesteryear who I think could have made the list. But we do have super chats that I'm going to read, and then I'm going to go through everyone's list. I'm going to put it on the screen. Couple super chats. One from Fa. He asked, for the PCL, did I consider Jokic being paired next to Shaq? No. Not a big fan of Jokic at the 4 lineups personally. So no, I did not consider that. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really consider anyone outside of like KG. That was really like the first thing I just went to straight away. I considered the guard, like the Michael Jordan, the Kobe Bryant, but it was KG for me. The next super chat is from Teddy Hart. It's a 2-part super chat. He said, I've started a project to create a metric that quantifies how talented an era was on average. Comparing dominance across eras has to also address how talented the average player was at that time. A level 10 guy dominating a league full of 5s looks more dominant than another level 10 guy in a later era dominating a league full of 7s. I agree with what you're saying. I'm very curious to know how you quantify that.
I think it's fair. I think that's actually a pretty cool project. And I think like the guy who would probably not benefit from that is Kareem, because the 70s were very, very weak. Whereas guys of today would probably benefit a lot because the league is just stacked.
And we could possibly end that argument of, if this guy played in this era and he played in that era, maybe we can just
eliminate era talk altogether.
I hate those arguments so much. Oh, good. But whatever. I'm very curious to see how you quantify that. Like, whenever you finish that, because it sounds like it's probably going to take a long time to get whatever you're doing. But whenever you finish that, let me know, because I'm curious to see how that all shakes out. And then final super chat, and then we'll get into our list. Brian Akeem said, Mars, when you said you are lower on peak Kobe, how low? I can't tell you a spot. I don't have a peak rankings. Maybe we'll do that on the episode one day. I don't know. But I'm definitely higher on Kobe's longevity than his peak. I will say, if I had to think off the top of my head, we're going all the way throughout NBA history, post-shot clock. I'm fairly confident I don't think Kobe has a top 10 peak. I'm fairly confident in that. So that would be determined as low compared to consensus. I think consensus would have him in the top 7, 8 peaks probably. I don't think I would have him top 10. So that's what I think by low if you're asking for a ranking. But anyway, let's get into showing everyone what everyone came up with. I have got my top 10 now. I made it up on the fly. Yeah, I made it up on the fly. I think it's all right. So I'll put it on the screen and then everyone can read theirs one by one. I'm gonna start with you, John D. So if you want to read what you have, who is your top 10?
At number 10, I had Larry Bird from the years 85 to 87. I had Kevin Durant at number 9 from, I believe, 13 to 15. Kobe at number 8 from 06 to 08. Nash at number 7 from 05 to 07. Shaq at number 6 from 2000 to 2002. Magic at 5. I believe this was 87 to 89. Then I had LeBron at 4, 15 to 18. MJ at 3, 89 to 91. Jokic from 23 to now, and Steph from 16 to 18.
Tyler?
Can I just say before I get into my list how cool it is that we all had the exact same 10 players and none of us talked to each other beforehand? Like,
oh yeah, that is kind of.
I didn't notice that.
I knew I should have put James Harden on the list.
I feel like that's a signal that we're all kind of in the same line of thinking. Like we have different orders, but we all have the same 10 guys. I think that's pretty cool. I had Kobe at 10, KD at 9, Larry Bird at 8, Nash at 7, Shaq at 6, Magic at 5, LeBron at 4, MJ at 3, Jokic at 2, and Steph Curry at number 1.
Tyler, we're pretty much seeing eye to eye. 7
I was going to say we're cooking. We're cooking. We
just
just
the same
flip
list
Kobe and Bird. If you just flip Kobe and Bird, we have the exact
Oh
same.
damn! Yeah, you do. Oh my god,
That's insane.
Yeah,
You cook, John D. You cook.
You cooked, man. You cooked, bro.
Go ahead, Sean.
I have Larry Bird at 10, Steve Nash at 9, Kobe at 8, Kevin Durant at 7, Magic Johnson at 6, Shaq at 5, LeBron at 4, Steph at 3, MJ at 2, and Jokic at 1.
And I have KD at 10, Kobe at 9, Larry Bird at 8, Shaq at 7, Nash at 6, Magic at 5, LeBron at 4, Steph at 3, MJ at 2, and Nikola Jokic at 1. That is all of our top 10s. And then Mark Kin came in with a late super chat to beat the buzzer. He said, I think the counter for going under LeBron's screens was the screener rolling into the defender and dragging them away. That's how they hunted mismatches. That's definitely a counter to going under screens for sure. That was the counter. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think Steph was more scheme proof than LeBron. I don't know if I said that when we were talking about it. I don't think he was. That just about does it. Under 2 hours. I think I'm proud of the way we handled time. I think that was decent. Did everyone enjoy that?
100%.
I did. Yeah, that was fun.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm glad everyone.
Oh yeah.
I feel like this was shorter than our. Was this shorter than our defense? I feel like
I want to say stuff. Let me check. I want to say
the defense one felt a lot longer than this. But maybe that's just because defense is probably like less interesting to talk about.
To be fair, I'm looking at we were about 10 minutes longer.
Okay.
2 hours and 7. We're at hour 57 right here, so not too bad.
That's pretty crazy how they lined up. That's crazy.
We speak about the same. I mean, I think the reason the defense one was longer, I think we had more honorable mentions, but like we said, we had
like 40.
Yeah, we had all the same 10 guys today, so we didn't have to speak about anyone else other than my James Harden diatribe. But where can everyone find you guys? Sean, where can everyone find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter at Sean_DAVI.
There you go. Tyler, where can everyone find
Hoop
you?
Venue, all platforms. I also have my personal pages, Tyler Britton. But if you're looking for my content, Hoop Venue, all platforms, find all that good stuff.
There you go. And John D.
You guys can find me over at the Buzzer Sports. Mock draft season is starting to heat up, and these player evals on these college players are about to get real spicy. I have some takes and some opinions on these players, so those are gonna be ramping up pretty soon. I'm gonna get back into the habit of dropping 5 to 6 times a week. It's just this March has been a little spotty with things to talk about, but we're gonna get back on track.
And obviously you can find me right here. So if you're watching the video, you don't need to. Mars Talk Sports on Twitter, X or whatever. But mainly here and on Player's Choice, obviously. I was gonna say something. I can't remember what I was gonna say. Make sure to leave a comment on what your list would be. I know people are gonna be mad about LeBron and Kobe and Steph, and we're gonna be called haters, and that's perfectly fine. I think you guys' links should be in the description. I think I did my job correctly. I hope so. I would also love to have you guys back on in the near future. I don't know when. We'll talk if you guys would be down to come back. I always enjoy these episodes. Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. John D wants me to do this show 2 times a week now during the playoffs.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Can't promise that's gonna happen, but he's trying.
I'm
So there's that.
trying,
Look
man.
out for the potentiality of that. But that about does it. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys did enjoy. Like the video. Once again, thank you to Tyler and Sean for doing this. They didn't have to do this, so thanks for giving us your time. We had fun. Hope everyone else had fun. Merry Christmas, and we will see you when we see you. Goodbye.